What is up, YouTube? This is T Quentin One coming at you with another video, and today I've got a list for you. I thought this might be kind of fun because, as someone who has covered movies and entertainment both recreationally on this channel and professionally in a couple writing gigs over the years, something that happens all the time is a movie is announced, it sounds awesome, and then it is blasted out of existence like Alderaan in Star Wars. I could probably spend weeks talking about all the different cool projects that might have been, but I've got five here today that I think not only would have been successful, but that I personally would have loved. Although, before I get to the actual list, I got a couple honorable mentions. The first one is Steven Spielberg's Black Hawks. I can't technically put it on the list as it hasn't officially been canceled, but there's been no movement on the project since 2018, and I don't think Spielberg at this point in his career has any interest doing a comic book movie, which is a shame because seeing what the man behind Indiana Jones and Private Ryan could do with DC's WW2 superhero team would have been really something. My other honorable mention is Guillermo del Toro's Count of Monte Cristo, also known as The Left Hand of Darkness. I could probably fill this whole list with projects del Toro has been involved with, from his Tom Cruise led At the Mountains of Madness movie to his undeniably superior version of The Hobbit to even Justice League Dark, but the one I always feel a twinge of disappointment for is this one. Reimagining the classic novel as a steampunk western that also has vampires in it is so go for broke del Toro. I mean, how can anybody not be pumped for that? The only thing that keeping it from the list proper is I honestly think he might revisit this idea at some point. I mean, Pinocchio fell through a couple times and he ended up making that. Same with his upcoming Frankenstein film. But for now, it's on the heap of things that might have been, and that's a shame. All right, now on to the actual list, starting with number five, which is Mike Flanagan's Revival. Flanagan is one of the most consistently spectacular voices in modern horror, and also someone who has an intimate understanding of what makes Stephen King work at his best, as evidenced by his excellent adaptation of Doctor Sleep. Which is why it's all the more disappointing that we never got to see his take on one of King's best recent efforts. The novel, a melancholic cautionary tale about the intersection of science and faith, is one that has everything a King fan could want. It's got memorable characters, some shocking story twist, and plenty of scares. And that ending, I mean, seeing that in theaters would have been insane. I really think this would have been a home run, and I wish he could have made it. Maybe someday. Number four, MIB 23. Envisioned not only as a trilogy capper for the Better Than Anybody Expected Jump Street reboot, but also a crossover with the Men in Black films. This was one of the many projects that got canned following the 2014 Sony hack. It's a shame, too, because this is a great pitch. Admittedly, the two franchises do have very different approaches to humor, but I think this would be a peanut butter and chocolate situation, blending the out there visual gags and fun world building of the latter with the meta style and more raunchy jokes of the former. And come on, can't you just see a scene in your head with Agent J and K and Schmidt and Jenko playing off each other? I mean, this writes itself. Number three, literally everything Warner Brothers Animation was working on in the 90s. I know this is cheating to include so many in one spot, but I couldn't pick just one example. Warner Brothers has a long history of behaving less like executors and more like executioners when it comes to their animated division, even today. And the 90s is a perfect example of that. Products that were canceled include an animated horror movie chronicling the legend of the Flying Dutchman starring David Bowie, a musical rendition of Bluebeard with Tim Curry in the title role, and even an epic about King Tutankhamun with countless more on the scrap pile. When you hear those bold, interesting ideas and then look at what the studio was actually putting out at the time, crap like Space Jam and Quest for Camelot, it's hard not to feel robbed. I mean, I guess we got Iron Giant. Number two, Sam Raimi's Spider Man 4. Look, I know we got closure to this universe with the admittedly decent No Way Home. I know the leaked script to this is actually pretty bad, and I know that Sam Raimi has been in a career slump for the last couple years. I know all of this, I just don't care. For a certain generation, it's hard to put into words the impact these films had. For my age group, these were as meaningful as The Wizard of Oz or the original Star Wars for those that preceded us. And going back into that world one last time with Sam Raimi in the director's chair and Toby in the suit is a trip any of us would take in a heartbeat. But as much as I'd love to see Spider Man 4, there is one movie whose cancellation hurt me just a little bit more. and that is my number one choice, which is Quentin Tarantino's Star Trek. Tarantino's final film is on the horizon, so join me in weeping in the fate of one of the most interesting combinations I've ever heard of. Bringing the cast of J.J. Abrams films for one last hurrah from the mastermind behind Pulp Fiction and Django Unchained is the kind of thing I lose sleep over. There is no one who could bring that kind of 60s energy and flair like Tarantino can, and injecting that back into modern Star Trek would have been beautiful. Hell, the sheer novelty of bringing the sensibilities of one of the most cynical and R-rated directors to the most optimistic franchise I can think of would be worth it alone. Putting aside the fact that just a movie with spacemen and 30s gangsters in it is a fun idea on its own, but you put one of the best modern directors in the chair for that script, you've got a fucking hit. Honestly, talking about it more might depress me a little bit, so I'm gonna cut it off here. That was my list. If you had any more films that you wish got made, put them in the comments. This is T Quentin One signing out.